Guy Fieri now regretting those handshakes with brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate, as he issues a statement claiming he doesn't know or support them.
What does it look like when someone who seemed completely untouchable starts to crack? Not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly. The way ice gives way beneath weight, it was never actually built to hold. Because not long ago, there was a man operating at a level that most people in the online space couldn't even comprehend. A presence so dominant, so culturally embedded, that entire generations of young men were quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, restructuring the way they thought about the world, about money, about power, about what it even means to exist as a man in the modern age.
I think that the things you own you.
Okay.
And perhaps you could have a whole bunch of money. If you want to live a very simple life, then you have more freedom. That's true.
Yeah.
But if you're stupid like me and you have a whole bunch of money and 102 cars and 33 houses and 4 baby mamas and a jet and a yacht, and you start getting all this shit, you turn out that you don't own it, it owns you, because every day you're getting problems dealing with these things.
Was it influence? Absolutely. Was it real? That depends on which version of the story you believe. And that right there, that tension between the image and the reality, is exactly where this story begins. At his peak, something interesting happened around Andrew Tate. Other creators, streamers, public figures, people who had built their own audiences, their own platforms, their own names, started visibly bending themselves just to be near him, just to exist within his orbit for a moment. Like proximity itself carried some kind of transferable weight. That's not just influence, that's something closer to gravity.
On your X account, to millions of people, you've said this: stop letting women vote, stop giving women position as judges, stop giving women political appointments. As soon as only men run government and law, all the problems disappear. Women now understand that without male protection, they're nothing but...
He had the cars, the compounds, the combat credentials, the kind of wealth that doesn't just suggest success, it performs it loudly, constantly, for anyone willing to pay attention. And millions were, tens of millions. So what happens when that gravity starts to weaken? What happens when the man who once seemed like he was operating 5 moves ahead of everyone else starts looking like he's barely reacting in real time? You could argue it started with the fight. When the announcement came that Tate would be returning to boxing, competing for a heavyweight title at 40 years old, nearly a decade removed from professional competition, something interesting began circulating online.
Is it fair to say that the greatest fraud check of all time happened on Saturday when Andrew Tate lost to Chase Damore?
It's an interesting philosophical question, because if you wrap in the persona part of it, then yes, like that's pretty
This might be the quintessential fraud check. If there was any sort of doubt about him winning, he should have never taken this fight. And now he's going online and he's doing the babyface thing of like, you have to live and I'd rather try and fail. No, that's not who you are. Your persona has nothing to do.
Not doubt exactly, more like curiosity. Could he actually do this? And the way he spoke about it suggested he had absolutely no question in his own mind. He wasn't framing Chase Damore as a significant challenge. He was framing this as a statement, a reminder, a return that would silence anyone who'd started wondering whether the version of Andrew Tate people had worshipped was still somewhere inside the man walking to that ring. It wasn't.
A big mouth, you know, he likes to show off, likes to get clicks. It's exactly what I thought he'd be. He's just a product of the new generation. Like I said, I don't think he thinks properly before he talks. I think he will regret saying that. Well, I know he'll regret it. I'll make him regret it. But I think even himself, he'll regret saying that. I just don't think he was thinking it through. I've definitely missed the whole the vibe of the gym, the camaraderie you have with the other people you're training with. I missed the brotherhood, but I knew exactly what I was getting in for. I knew exactly what I was going to be preparing for. I knew exactly what we were going to have to do. I knew how hard it was going to be. I was very excited by it. And we're coming to the end of that now. The training's been done. It's time to fight. So.
The performance that followed, ending in a majority decision loss, would have been damaging enough on its own. But what made it genuinely difficult to watch wasn't the result, it was what came after. Because rather than absorbing it cleanly the way his entire brand suggested he would, he began producing something that sounded uncomfortably like a list of reasons why it wasn't really his fault. The adrenaline dump, the weight difference, the 10 years away, the Romanian dungeon. Each one delivered with the disclaimer that he wasn't making excuses.
Obviously, I didn't get the result I wanted, but truthfully, the result I wanted was to see if I could still do it. 40 years old, 10 years retired, a little bit of time in a Romanian dungeon. It was always going to be a big ask against someone so much bigger than me, younger than me, more active than me, but I wanted a real challenge. I didn't want to fight a tin can. I didn't want to fight someone older than me or smaller than me. You know, I felt like I won the first 2 rounds, but then because he's 20 kilo heavier, he started leaning on me and sapped some energy. But I didn't quit. never give up, never retreat, never surrender, fight to the end, go out on your shield. So I have no excuses. Training camp went fantastic. Time is the fire in which we all burn. Unfortunately, a 40-year-old's not a 22-year-old. I gave it my absolute all, and I have nothing but respect for Chase. I have no excuses. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. I'm not going to make up any reasons. He was the man who won. He deserves this.
Could it be that the version of Andrew Tate who preached never retreat, never surrender simply wasn't available that night? And if so, had he ever been? That question started hanging in the air, and then people started digging. What emerged from a detailed breakdown of his career record was something that shifted the entire conversation. Not just about the fight, about the foundation, because the fighting credentials, the world titles, the professional record, the combat identity that had been central to his entire persona, turned out to rest on ground considerably less solid than anyone had reason to assume. Opponents with no verifiable record outside of fights with Tate, titles from organizations that barely existed in any meaningful sporting context.
Andrew's not the same man he was 10 years ago. He's a lot older than he was. I think it showed in the ring. You know, I respect him a lot for getting in there and trying. And I love him, and I support anything he wants to.
Wins that, when people went looking for documentation, simply couldn't be confirmed as ever having happened. This was supposed to be the one thing that was real, the one corner of the persona nobody questioned. Was this the moment the whole architecture started becoming visible? Then came the nightclub, a video, a song, a room full of people, including Tate, and a reaction that spread across the internet in hours.
Miami Beach nightclub catching heat, accused of celebrating hate with a song about Hitler.
His response introduced something his audience had never quite seen from him before: deflection. Not the loud, confrontational pushback they'd been conditioned to expect, but something quieter, something that pointed sideways towards someone else in the room, towards Sneako. And what followed was weeks of public back and forth that produced something nobody had predicted.
Absolute disgust. Disgusted, horrified.
City leaders reacting to videos making the rounds on social media featuring the Kanye West song with the lyrics "Heil Hitler" over and over again. The same men seen in the club, known as controversial influencers, are also in a video from a limo. In that one, they're singing, and one of them is performing a Nazi salute.
To have people in our city celebrating this. Animals.
This is obviously not welcome in Miami Beach. It should not be welcome anywhere in the world.
People started siding against Tate, not because of the initial controversy alone, but because of how he handled it. Because backing down and redirecting blame is the precise opposite of everything his audience had ever been sold. The man who built an empire telling other men never to make excuses was making excuses. Publicly, repeatedly, in real time. The internet noticed. Then an old clip resurfaced. Tate explaining with complete confidence that reading books was something people with slow brains did. That his mind operated on a level that made sitting with a book beneath him. The comment sections didn't need much encouragement, but more interesting than the mockery was his response to the mockery. Because for someone who had always performed total indifference to what people thought, who had practically built a religion around not caring, this particular response carried a very specific energy. The kind that looks less like someone brushing something off and more like someone trying very hard to appear to be brushing something off. There's a difference, and people were beginning to notice it. Something else had quietly shifted too. In recent appearances, Tate had started saying something his audience wasn't used to hearing, that things weren't quite as fulfilling as they'd appeared, that all the cars and properties and luxury created their own weight, that he was stressed, anxious, that every night brought nightmares, and every day carried a pressure that didn't lift. Now set that next to a man who once told his audience openly and repeatedly that depression wasn't real, that mental health struggles were weakness dressed up in acceptable language. Watch those two images sit beside each other for a moment. Is there an irony there? Absolutely. Is it the kind of irony the internet was ever going to let pass quietly? Not a chance. And through all of it, the legal situation continued developing, investigations reopening, political pressure building across multiple countries. The kind of institutional attention that doesn't tend to simply lose interest and move on. Meanwhile, the cultural landscape he'd once commanded was shifting beneath him. He acknowledged it himself, almost wistfully noting that the things he once said that shocked people no longer had the same effect, that the space had been claimed by voices willing to go further, louder, with fewer limits. For a man whose entire power came from being the most extreme voice in the room, what does it mean when the room moves past you? And yet here's what makes this genuinely complicated. He's still here, still generating attention, still triggering reactions across every platform that covers him, So is this a collapse, or is it something else, a restructuring, a shedding, a painful transition toward whatever comes next for someone who has survived this much before? The man who once seemed like the answer to something, what was the question exactly? And now that the answer is looking considerably less certain, does the question even still matter? Something is ending. That much seems clear. Whether it's Andrew Tate himself or just one version of him might be the only thing nobody can actually answer yet.